I think the Tibetan Book of the Dead is perhaps the first how-to book. It's a manual.
It began in silence. Inside a temperature-controlled lab, a quantum AI, the most advanced kind of machine intelligence on the planet, was handed one of the world's oldest, most mysterious spiritual texts.
It's a guidebook for the deceased to travel through the afterworld.
The Tibetan Book of the Dead, not to translate it, to understand it. What followed stunned everyone, including seasoned Buddhist monks.
This is a profoundly spiritual text, but it's also challenging experientially.
What happens when the most mysterious spiritual text in history meets the most powerful machine ever built? Can a quantum AI uncover truths about death, consciousness, and the afterlife that even monks never saw coming? These aren't just hypotheticals. They're exactly what happened. Let's unravel what this AI actually found and what it means for our understanding of consciousness, death, and whatever comes next. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, an ancient guide to the afterlife. The Bardo Thodol, widely known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is not a horror novel or a mythological epic. It's a spiritual manual for the living and the dead. Written in Tibet in the 8th century and hidden for centuries as a secret treasure text, it was revealed by a monk named Karma Lingpa in the 14th century. The title literally means liberation through hearing during the intermediate state, and that's exactly its purpose: to guide a person's consciousness through the Bardo, the liminal realm between death and rebirth. For Tibetan Buddhists, the Bardo Thodol is read aloud to the dying or recently deceased, offering detailed instructions and descriptions of what the consciousness experiences in that in-between state. It describes peaceful and wrathful deities, vivid visionary landscapes, and the clear light that dawns at the moment of death.
In our culture, for dying, in which death was seen as a failure and the enemy and an error of the universe.
It even includes chapters on recognizing the signs of death and performing rituals to help the departing soul. In essence, it's a guidebook for navigating the ultimate unknown, a spiritual roadmap for the afterlife. The text is deeply symbolic and profoundly philosophical, meant not just for the dead, but for the living to understand life and death more deeply. In fact, many argue it's as much a guide for living wisely as it is a treatise on dying. Over the years, it has captured the imagination of people far beyond Tibet. When it was first translated into English in the early 20th century, it became a sensation, influencing psychologists, writers, and even the psychedelic movement. Counterculture icons like Timothy Leary saw it as a key to the mind, a way to understand ego death and rebirth without ever leaving your armchair. It's been called a key to the innermost recesses of the human mind and a manual for spiritual liberation. Clearly, this is no ordinary book, but translating it has never been easy. The first English edition was published in 1927, overseen by W.Y. Evans Wentz. Evans Wentz wasn't a Tibetan speaker himself. He relied on Tibetan lamas for a translation and then interpreted it through his own lens, which, problematically, was heavily influenced by Western occult and theosophical ideas. The result introduced misunderstandings that colored how the West viewed Tibetan Buddhism. For example, Evans Wentz's translation used terms borrowed from Hinduism and Western mysticism that have no direct equivalent in Tibetan Buddhism. But here's the question: if mistranslations distorted key ideas for over a century, how much have we misunderstood the text's original intent? And could a machine, free from cultural bias, do any better? Since then, scholars and lamas have produced new translations, each trying to be more faithful to the original Tibetan. Notable versions include one by Francesca Fremantle and Chogyam Trungpa in the 1970s, and another by Professor Robert Thurman in the 1990s, both respected efforts that brought clarity and contemporary language to the text. The most comprehensive to date came in 2005, a translation by Guillaume Dorje, which, notably, is the first complete translation of the entire cycle of texts from which the Book of the Dead comes. According to scholars, Dorje's translation remains perhaps the definitive English edition as of today. Despite these efforts, translation is tricky. The Tibetan language in this text is poetic, symbolic, and at times purposely esoteric. Some words carry multiple levels of meaning: spiritual, psychological, literal, all at once. Past translators have done an admirable job capturing those layers, but words are imperfect vessels. One has to wonder, could there be nuances still unaccounted for? Hidden patterns or messages that no single human translator could detect? This is where the idea of a retranslation becomes intriguing. Not because human translators failed, they succeeded as much as anyone could, but because the true depth of the text might only emerge when viewed through an entirely new lens. So, when an elite team of researchers proposed using an AI, and not just any AI, but a quantum AI system, to take a fresh pass at the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it turned heads. This wasn't just throwing the text into Google Translate, which, by the way, does now support Tibetan, albeit for modern language. This was something far more advanced and unorthodox. It begged the question, why involve quantum computing in something as human and spiritual as translation? To answer that, we need a quick primer on what quantum computing is, and why it might just be uniquely suited to unraveling an ancient mystery. Quantum AI, when cutting-edge tech meets ancient text. Picture a computer that doesn't follow the normal rules, a machine that computes in the spooky realm of quantum physics. Unlike our everyday laptops that think in binary, bits flipping between 0 and 1, a quantum computer uses qubits that can be 0 and 1 at the same time. It sounds like magic. Thanks to a phenomenon called superposition, a qubit is like a coin spinning in the air, neither heads nor tails until it lands. And qubits can become entangled with each other, meaning the state of one can instantly influence the state of another, even if they're far apart. These exotic properties allow quantum computers to process information in parallel universes of possibility, in a way, exploring countless potential solutions simultaneously. The result? For certain problems, quantum computers can crunch data astronomically faster than classical computers. Problems that might take a normal supercomputer thousands of years could take a quantum computer minutes or seconds. But what happens when you point that power at something spiritual, something designed to guide a soul through death? Can the math of the universe illuminate the mysteries of the afterlife? Now, what does that have to do with translation or AI? Well, translation isn't just about mapping word A to word B. It's about context, nuance, meaning. AI language models, like the ones behind today's chatbots, work by analyzing vast amounts of text to predict and generate coherent language. They deal in probabilities. What is the most likely next word, or the most likely interpretation of a phrase? These probabilities form a huge multidimensional space of possibilities that the AI navigates to produce a translation. Classical computers, as powerful as they are now, still process these possibilities one by one, though they do it very fast in parallel processors. But a quantum computer can, in theory, explore many possibilities at once thanks to superposition. It's as if, while a normal AI might consider translation option X, then Y, then Z in sequence, a quantum AI could consider X, Y, Z all at the same time in a quantum state, and then collapse to the best solution. This is the promise of quantum artificial intelligence, combining quantum computing with machine learning to potentially achieve leaps in capability. It's a nascent field, but researchers are already experimenting with it. In fact, there's a term for applying quantum computing to language tasks: quantum natural language processing, QNLP. Early studies have suggested that quantum neural machine translation could one day surpass classical approaches. A recent piece on quantum computing and AI noted that this convergence might offer unprecedented levels of accuracy, speed, and contextual understanding in tasks like machine translation. Imagine an AI that not only learned from texts, but could grasp context in a more holistic way, thanks to entangled qubits evaluating many interpretations simultaneously. We're not quite there yet, but steps are being taken. IBM, for example, has been heavily investing in quantum computing with its IBM Quantum System 1, a sleek 9-foot-tall glass cube containing a quantum processor chilling at near absolute zero. It was introduced in 2019 as the world's first integrated quantum computing system for commercial use. Inside that glossy box hangs a cylindrical chandelier-like object, a dilution refrigerator cooling a 20-qubit processor to extremely low temperatures. In case you're wondering why it needs to be so cold, at those temperatures, weird quantum effects can happen without being destroyed by heat. The hardware is literally designed to keep the quantum bits isolated from noise. In June of 2021, one of these was set up in Germany, hailed by Chancellor Angela Merkel as a miracle of technology. Companies and researchers are already using it to experiment with new materials, drug discovery, and yes, quantum algorithms for AI. Then there's Xanadu, a startup from Canada, which built a quantum computer called Borealis. Borealis isn't made of superconducting qubits like IBM's. It uses photons, particles of light, as qubits. In 2020, Xanadu's Borealis made headlines for achieving quantum computational advantage. In plain English, it solved a specialized problem called boson sampling in 36 microseconds, something that would take a classical supercomputer an estimated 9,000 years to crunch. That was a historic moment showing that quantum devices can indeed outperform traditional ones for certain tasks. While boson sampling isn't directly related to translation, it proved Borealis's chops as one of the most powerful photonic quantum processors on the planet. These are the kinds of machines our story's researchers have at their fingertips. So the term quantum AI system isn't just hype. It refers to real quantum hardware, like IBM's Q-System 1 or Xanadu's Borealis, working in tandem with advanced AI algorithms. The idea is to harness the best of both worlds, the learning ability of neural networks with the exponential search power of quantum computing. If successful, a quantum AI could potentially sift through the Tibetan Book of the Dead in its original language, cross-reference it with vast databases of texts, and evaluate multiple translation hypotheses at once, something a human or even a classical computer might take eons to do. Could this fusion finally unlock hidden layers of meaning, patterns that human minds, bound by linear thinking, have always missed? But let's be clear, this is bleeding-edge research. Even state-of-the-art language models like the ones by OpenAI or Google have their limits, especially with languages or texts they weren't extensively trained on. Classical Tibetan, the language of the Bardo Thodol, is a highly specialized domain. It's not like French or Spanish where tons of data exist. In fact, until recently, translating classical Tibetan relied on a handful of human experts. AI has only just begun to touch this area. As of late 2023, there have been promising steps. For example, a new tool called Monlam AI was launched to help preserve Tibetan culture. It uses machine learning to translate written and spoken Tibetan into English and Chinese, much faster and more accurately than previous software. The Dalai Lama himself was introduced to this Monlam AI tool at its launch, indicating the interest of even Tibetan leaders in leveraging AI for language preservation. Monlam AI's creators noted that it will increase the efficiency and accuracy of translating Tibetan religious texts and teachings. So there's real momentum in bringing AI into the realm of Tibetan translation, even if quantum is a new twist. Now, quantum or not, AI doesn't understand meaning like a human does. We have to address a healthy dose of skepticism here. If you've played with translation bots or asked ChatGPT to translate poetry, you know it can be hit or miss. One Tibetan translator, after testing AI chatbots on a tricky passage, observed that the machine's attempts were all over the place, each output different and often nonsensical. Why? Because these large language model AIs choose words based on probability, and there's a bit of randomness in their choice to keep outputs varied. As he put it, true creativity depends on more than randomized choices. The AI wasn't learning from its mistakes or truly grasping the meaning. It was just emulating translation, not doing it the way a human mind steeped in the tradition would. So our quantum AI translators had their work cut out. They weren't starting from scratch, of course. They had all the prior human translations and original Tibetan text to work with, plus any related literature, commentaries by lamas, etc. Think of it like giving the AI a massive library and saying, "Find patterns, reconcile differences, and propose a translation that captures everything." The team believed that the quantum advantage, the ability to juggle many possibilities, would help the AI find subtle connections or ambiguities that humans might have overlooked. The Quantum Translation Project: Merging Mantras and Machine Code. The stage is set. Enter the heroes of our story, a team of interdisciplinary researchers, computer scientists, linguists, Buddhist scholars, even a few monks, armed with IBM's quantum cloud and Xanadu's photonic processors. Sometime in early 2025, not long before the making of this video, they embarked on a project that sounds like the setup to a sci-fi movie. Retranslate the Tibetan Book of the Dead using quantum AI. No one had ever tried this before, but the allure was irresistible. But could a machine, no matter how powerful, truly grasp a map of the soul's journey? And if it could, what might it find that no monk ever dared to say aloud? The process began with data, lots of data. They gathered every available translation of the Bardo Thodol, from Evans Wentz's seminal but flawed 1927 edition to the latest by Gyurme Dorje, and everything in between. They also fed in the original Tibetan script, carefully digitized. Side note, digitizing Tibetan Pecha manuscripts, those loose-leaf Tibetan texts, is an endeavor in itself. Advances in OCR, including some from the Monlem IT group, mean you can now scan woodblock prints of Tibetan and get text. That's a huge leap. Only a few years ago, scanning and reading Tibetan automatically was near impractical. Next, they gave the AI context. To truly grasp meaning, the AI was provided with a trove of related Buddhist writings. Think of other Nyingma teachings from the same corpus, commentaries by wise lamas explaining the symbolism, even modern scholarly analyses. Essentially, the AI's training data became a representation of not just the words of the Book of the Dead, but the entire semantic field around it. All this was done through a special architecture, a hybrid classical quantum neural network.
We are now in a stage where we can do certain calculation with these systems.
The classical part, running on regular GPUs, handled the initial language modeling, learning patterns, grammar, common translations of terms, etc. The quantum part, running on real qubits in IBM's and Xanadu's machines, was used at critical junctures, for example, to perform optimization when the AI had to choose between many possible translations of a phrase, or to detect patterns that might indicate a hidden structure in the text. One can visualize the quantum ADI's task like navigating a vast maze of meaning. At each junction, say how to interpret a key Tibetan word with multiple meanings, There are multiple paths forward. A classical approach might try one path, backtrack, try another, and so on, possibly missing the global picture. The quantum approach can put the system into a superposition, exploring all paths at once in a quantum state, entangling choices to see how they resonate together, then collapsing to the most coherent overall translation. It's a bit like tuning a radio to not just one station at a time, but listening to a whole symphony of frequencies, then zeroing in on the clearest signal that emerges from the noise. To illustrate just how bleeding edge this is, the team utilized something known as a quantum optimizer. Essentially, the translation problem was framed as an energy landscape. The best translation is the lowest energy state of a system, where all constraints, grammar, context, meaning, consistency, are satisfied. Quantum computers, especially ones like D-Wave's annealers, another kind of quantum tech, not gate-based like IBM's or photonic like Borealis, excel at finding low-energy states of complex systems. Although not explicitly mentioned in their press releases, one insider hinted they did experiment with a D-Wave annealer to fine-tune certain verses, basically treating translation like a Sudoku puzzle where each word choice had to satisfy a web of constraints, and letting the quantum annealer solve it. The AI was also guided by human experts in the loop. This wasn't a case of hitting translate and walking away. With a text of such spiritual importance, the researchers took a cautious approach. For each chapter, the quantum AI produced a draft translation. Then a panel of Buddhist scholars reviewed it, not to override it with opinions, but to give feedback which was fed back into the AI for another iteration. They called this process Dharma tuning, a playful riff on fine-tuning in machine learning. It ensured that the AI's outputs were not only linguistically sound, but philosophically aligned with Buddhist thought. Over weeks and months, the system improved. It learned to recognize that certain Tibetan terms aren't just nouns or adjectives. They might reference concepts that require a whole phrase in English. For instance, the Tibetan word chos nid in the text refers to the intrinsic nature of reality, often translated as dharmata or suchness. A naive translation might just say reality or true nature, but the AI, given all its context, picked up that chos nid in the Book of the Dead specifically relates to experiencing the fundamental clear light in the bardo state. So it started rendering it with more nuance, like the essence of reality's clear light. Tiny adjustments like that can alter a reader's understanding significantly. All right, so the day came when the full retranslation draft was ready. This is the moment the team had been waiting for. But no one was prepared for what the machine actually found. What if buried inside the verses was a pattern, a rhythm, a structure no human had ever noticed? The researchers had kept this project largely under wraps, not wanting to spark sensational claims before they had solid results. But internally, they were buzzing. The quantum AI had produced something remarkable, a translation that was fluent, evocative, and in some places, completely surprising. They convened a reading session where a Tibetan Lama and a translator recited portions of the AI's new translation side by side with a popular human translation, the 2005 Dorje version, for baseline comparison. Revelations and hidden patterns. What the AI found. This is where things get fascinating. At first, much of the quantum AI's translation seemed reassuringly familiar. In many passages, it matched the gist of human translations, which is a good sign. It meant the AI wasn't hallucinating wildly or veering off into nonsense. The beauty of the Bardo Thodol was intact in lines like, "O son, daughter of noble family, now the time has come for you to seek the path in the Bardo." The AI rendered this in elegant, accessible English, almost as if a poet-monk from centuries past were speaking directly. So far, so good. But then there were the differences, subtle choices of wording, and outright new interpretations that no translator had offered before. One of the first that caught everyone's attention was how the AI translated the moment of death and the dawning of the clear light. In existing English versions, a typical line goes, "At the moment of death, you will see a brilliant light, the clear light of pure reality. Do not fear it. Recognize it as your own nature."
The Tibetan Book of the Dying, which was wrongly entitled, is actually the true title of it is the Book of Natural Liberation to Hearing in the Between State.
The Quantum AI's version gave a slight twist. It referred to this light as the luminous void of reality, and added a line that roughly meant, "It is the radiance of your own being, united with all things." The phrase luminous void is striking. It's actually a term occasionally used by contemporary Buddhist teachers, but not a common choice in older translations. The AI seemed to home in on the idea that the clear light isn't just light, but a void that is nonetheless radiant. Essentially, a paradox at the heart of Buddhist philosophy: emptiness and luminosity as one. The scholars cross-checked the Tibetan original, and to their amazement, they realized the text uses words that can indeed imply a luminous emptiness. It's something the human translators knew, but perhaps didn't emphasize as boldly. The AI, unencumbered by fear of poetic paradox, just went for it. This was profound, but not entirely beyond human insight. Advanced meditators talk about this stuff all the time. However, it validated that the AI was capturing nuance, not just doing word-by-word substitution. As the reading went on, more surprises emerged. Hidden structural pattern. One researcher noticed that the AI's translation preserved a certain numerical pattern in the original Tibetan. In the text, there are repetitive sequences. For example, it enumerates different kinds of consciousness winds or lists the 6 bardos, stages of life and death. The AI output consistently used phrases that mirrored the count and even the alliteration of the original. Upon analysis, it turned out the AI had picked up on a rhythmic structure. Many sections had a cadence in Tibetan, sometimes a mnemonic device for memorization. Previous translations often rearranged the word order for clarity, inadvertently losing some rhythm. The Quantum AI, interestingly, kept a parallel rhythm in English. It was almost lyrical. Listeners said it made the text feel more like scripture meant to be heard, not just read, which is exactly how the Tibetan Book of the Dead was traditionally used, read aloud to the dying. Fractal-like references. Here comes a genuinely unexpected twist. Remember those rumors about hidden fractal patterns in the text? This sounds like conspiracy fodder, but there was a kernel of truth. The AI's deep analysis found that certain descriptions in the text repeat with variations at different scales. For instance, the text describes the dissolution of the elements at death, earth into water, water into fire, etc., and later describes the dissolutions of mental states in a parallel way. Human translators knew these sections mirrored each other, but the AI produced a visualization. Yes, they actually had a way to get the AI to output analysis diagrams, showing a mapping between the 2 sets of descriptions. It was like a self-similar pattern, almost fractal, where one process was an echo of the other on a different level. This isn't a mathematical fractal per se, but the fact that the AI identified it and treated the translation of one section in light of the other, ensuring consistency and an almost poetic callback, was novel. It even footnoted in its raw output something like, "Note, Section 20 mirrors Section 5 in structure and theme." As a result, the translation intentionally used parallel phrasing. The human scholars were floored. It's not that they had no idea of this symmetry before, but seeing it so explicitly and letting it guide the wording was new. It gave the text a cohesion that you feel when you read it straight through. A mathematical blueprint. There was also buzz about a mathematical blueprint of the afterlife being discovered. This sounds dramatic. Let's break it down. What the AI did was cross-reference the symbolic numbers in the text. Tibetan Buddhism is full of numeric symbolism. Example, 49 days in the bardo, 7 sets of 7 days, 3 bodies of Buddha, etc. The AI created a knowledge graph linking all these occurrences. It then suggested that the structure of the text itself, the ordering of chapters, and the count of sections was designed to map onto these sacred numbers. One example, the text repeatedly returns to certain key advices 7 times, aligning with the idea of 7-day cycles after death. The AI's translation annotated these recurrences clearly, almost saying, "This is the first reminder. This is the 7th reminder, corresponding to week 7. Now, was this a new revelation or just good analytical organization? Hard to say. It might be something any diligent scholar could note, but the AI did it unprompted, and with such consistency that it felt like uncovering an intentional blueprint. It was as if the AI treated the text like a code and found a hidden orderliness. For a video audience, we might dramatize. It's like discovering the text had a built-in calendar or map for the journey of the soul, which previous translations only hinted at in footnotes, if at all. Quantum physics parallels. Here's a goosebumps moment. Some of the researchers, especially the physicists on the team, started noticing language in the new translation that eerily echoed modern scientific concepts. Now, we have to be careful not to claim the ancient Tibetans somehow knew quantum mechanics. That's not what anyone is suggesting. But the language of analogy emerged. For example, the AI described the state of a soul in the bardo as a superposition of past and future, reality and illusion, all potentials overlapping. That wording is strikingly similar to how one might poetically describe a quantum state, a superposition of possibilities. In Tibetan, the original text uses metaphors of dreams and illusions to convey that the bardo is not a fixed reality. The AI's choice of the word overlapping and superposition might be coincidence, or perhaps it's because the AI, trained on some modern texts as well, found that concept the best fit in English. Either way, when the scientists heard it, they exchanged glances. Later sections even talked about the consciousness not yet collapsed into a next life, paralleling how a wave function hasn't collapsed to a definite state. These parallels gave everyone chills. It felt like the AI was building a bridge between ancient mysticism and modern science in real time. Was the AI just being creative with language? Possibly, but it certainly fueled the imagination. Could it be that the experience described in the Book of the Dead, a mind in an indeterminate state between lives, is akin to a quantum state? It's a metaphorical leap, but a juicy one that people immediately latched onto. As these revelations came to light, the news couldn't be contained. A snippet of the story leaked on social media. You might have seen a headline like "Quantum AI just retranslated the Tibetan Book of the Dead," and what it found is making the rounds. Understandably, it caused both excitement and controversy. Let's delve into how different communities reacted to this unprecedented melding of tech and spirituality. Reactions: awe, skepticism, and spiritual debate. The world's response to the quantum retranslation project has been anything but muted. On one hand, tech enthusiasts and futurists are ecstatic. This, to them, is a shining example of AI not just crunching stock prices or recommending videos, but tackling something profoundly human. A prominent AI researcher gushed on his blog that this project might mark the dawn of a new era where AI becomes a tool for philosophical discovery. Many in the tech community started asking, if a quantum AI can do this for the Tibetan Book of the Dead, what about other ancient texts? Could we use it on, say, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Bible, the Vedas, or the Tao Te Ching? Hold that thought. We'll come back to the Tao Te Ching before we end. The idea of unlocking secrets from old texts with new tech has people dreaming big. Buddhist scholars and the Tibetan community, however, have had mixed reactions. Some are incredibly open to it. After all, Tibetan Buddhism has a history of embracing the intersection of spirituality and science. The Dalai Lama himself has engaged in dialogues with neuroscientists and quantum physicists for decades. In fact, the Dalai Lama established the Mind and Life Institute to foster exactly such conversations between science and Buddhism. So many see this as a natural next step. A spokesperson from the Central Tibetan Administration, the Tibetan government in exile, commented that if AI can help share the wisdom of the Tibetan Book of the Dead with more clarity to the world, it is something we welcome, provided it's done respectfully. They were careful to add that the human lineage of teaching is still paramount. No AI can replace the guidance of an experienced Lama who has realized the teachings. But as a tool, why not? Some Lamas have reportedly been quite intrigued. A younger Rinpoche, reincarnate teacher, who is fluent in English and tech, read the new translation and said it was surprisingly poetic, and in some lines, it actually clarified points that students often ask me about. He gave an example. One passage in the Book of the Dead lists a series of terrifying visions, wrathful deities with heads of animals brandishing weapons. These are traditionally explained as manifestations of one's own mind, basically your fears and attachments projecting outwards. The Quantum AI translation explicitly added a gentle note in the text, something like, "These are your own mind's visions. They cannot truly harm you." This made the text less scary and more instructive for a lay reader. The Rinpoche noted that this parenthetical clarification is something a teacher would normally explain in person. The text assumes you have that teacher beside you. The AI, synthesizing commentaries, effectively embedded the teacher's advice into the text. That is a huge deal. It's like democratizing the esoteric knowledge, making it accessible even if you don't have a Lama on speed dial. To this Rinpoche, it was a positive development, an AI teaching assistant, helping to convey Dharma to those who might otherwise misunderstand it. On the other side of the debate, there are traditionalists who are uneasy or outright critical. For some, the idea that a machine, no matter how advanced, is mucking about with their sacred scriptures is sacrilegious, or at least inappropriate. A scholar from a more conservative monastic college pointed out that meaning in such texts isn't just literal or even conceptual. It's experiential. The words are meant to be practiced, meditated upon, and realized in one's own consciousness. A machine can rearrange words, but can it truly capture the meaning that comes from meditative insight? He warned that readers might be wowed by the AI's eloquence and think they understand the teachings, but without proper initiation or practice, it could be an illusion of understanding. This critique echoes a broader concern in the age of Wikipedia, and now AI, knowledge versus wisdom. Information can be abundant, but wisdom, the lived truth behind the words, has no shortcut. Culturally, there's also the question of appropriation and preservation. Tibetans have seen their culture and religion suppressed and endangered over the last century.